welcome to our podcast. This is Bud Chapman. I'm Dave Poole, and this is the I Object podcast, largely based on your background. Why don't you, Bud, talk a little bit about what your background is?
Thanks, Dave. Yeah, my wife and I moved here to Charleston, Mount Pleasant, in April of 2023. I was a trial lawyer, personal injury trial lawyer in Southern California for near 40 years. My wife finally hammered on me enough to retire rather than die in a courtroom. And so I closed my practice at the end of 2022. My wife was a registered nurse that did ostomy care, which is a real serious aspect of nursing. There's a bit of sainthood that goes along with it. And there weren't very many of those nurses. So she was on a national board. She worked at UCLA Medical Center. She was on a national board of registered nurses that were ostomy care nurses, and came to Charleston for a conference. I want to say it was about 2018. I know it was prior to the pandemic.
Yeah.
And she fell in love with the place. And our daughter, who lives in New York City in Manhattan, came down on a different occasion, a separate occasion, and they spent a week in Charleston and looked at a few houses here in Mount Pleasant. And then we came back a couple of times, and we finally bought a home in Carolina Park. We love it here. And I was fortunate enough to meet Dave over a couple of libations, and I'm really happy to be here on this podcast. There are a whole lot of things I'm sure that Dave and I can tug on your coat about, and that's really what it's about. It's not going to change anybody's life much, but we hope that we'll be able to add just a little bit of
Entertainment value.
A little entertainment
Yeah.
to your day, and so thanks for listening.
So the title of the podcast being I Object is just a play off of Bud's prior career. We may talk about a lot of things that one or both of us object about. We'll talk about things that we like, but there are some things we won't talk about.
Sure. I don't imagine we're going to be spending a whole lot of time talking about anything of a self-help nature, because we probably need that as much or more than anybody. And having been listening to podcasts now for some time myself, there are enough true crime podcasts out there to take you into the next century. So we're not going to be talking about true crime, unless it happens to be something that's topical here in Mount Pleasant or in Charleston that has some relevance to to what we're doing. But we're not going to be talking about that kind of stuff. We're not going to be talking about the Kardashians or reality shows, or we're going to be talking about everyday stuff that affects all of us in some way or another. And the funny thing about Dave came up with the title I Object is, and I told Dave this, I said, yeah, as a trial lawyer, and I tried a lot of jury trials, cases to verdict rather. I rarely objected to anything unless it was completely out of bounds. I rarely objected to anything because I always felt that it gave the jury the impression that you were trying to hide something. And we're not here to hide anything. So we're going to tell you, things that we object to. And if you don't object to them, that's fine too. And we welcome any feedback that we're ever able to get. So
absolutely. So I know Bud and I share quite a few interests. So we're both big music fans in a variety of genres. We're both major league sports fans. So it was nice for me to sit down and find somebody I could talk about hockey with. So we'll try not to dwell on the nuances of hockey, but certainly other sports were in there, among other things. So we just share a ton of good interests. So we've really hit it off well.
And that's like I said, I'm fortunate to be here, and I thank Dave for inviting me into this. It's not something I envisioned getting involved in, but I'm certainly excited about the whole idea. And I'm sure that we're going to come up with plenty of stuff to talk about.
Yeah. So just before we came on camera, we were talking about a baseball topic. In particular, just how the state of umpiring in Major League Baseball has just gone to hell. for lack of a better way to say it. I know, the thing that hit me most recently is finally Angel Hernandez, who was widely held as being the worst umpire maybe in the history of the major leagues, although the statistics don't back that up. Was relieved of his duties finally.
Dave pointed this out to me, and because I didn't know this, Angel Hernandez was notoriously a horrible umpire. I mean, and I don't really know how he managed to survive all the years that he umpired, except that the umpires do have a strong union. But Dave pointed this out. I guess there's a rating system that gets published now, and there's what, Dave? How many umpires are there in the big leagues?
Oh gosh, so probably 120 or so, something like that.
And what Angel was, he was ranked somewhere in the 80s.
Yeah, it wasn't even that close to the bottom. And it's based on, they have if you watch a baseball game, they have the little box around the home plate, so you can see where the balls and strikes are, or what they should be based on what TV thinks your strike zone should be, which is a whole other discussion. But he ended up somewhere in that 80, 90 range, as I recall. And
it's hard for me to believe that there were that many umpires that were worse.
Yeah.
And the thing about the little box that's funny to me personally is for, I don't know, I want to say 15 years, my pals and I, this goes back 20, 25 years, but my pals and I had a 4th of July wiffle ball tournament every year, an annual wiffle ball tournament, the Wiffle Ball Classic, we called it. And it was, we played it at these two brothers that I've been friends with forever. We played it at their home. It was a perfect wiffle ball field in terms of the driveway. And we had a board that we sized out, much like the square that you see on TV. And that was the strike zone. And there was a guy that played in the tournament every year who was about 5'5", and I used to throw him a curveball that would break at about his nose, and it would hit the board, and it was really unfair to him. But I know there's a lot of talk now about automated strike zones and doing away with plate umpires. I don't know if that's going to happen anytime soon. Like I said, I think the strength of the union has a lot to do with that. I don't know if MLB wants to go that far, but some of these guys, and Dave and I were talking about this before we started, we see the plate umpire, 90% of the time. I mean, we see the calls on the bases, but we see the plate umpire because they show you pitch by pitch. Some of these guys are absolutely brutal. They're just brutal. All these pitchers nowadays spin the ball at 95 plus, and balls break out of the strike. They look like they're going to be a strike until about 3 feet short of the hitter. And then they break down sometimes almost in the dirt. Guy couldn't hit it with a boat oar, and they're rung up on it. It's baffling. I don't know why MLB hasn't done something to address the issue, but it's become very topical, and it's just across the board. I feel bad for some of these hitters.
Yeah, and I guess the thing that, I mean, in my day job, in my real life, I'm pretty data oriented. So you would think I would naturally lean towards, let's get some sort of machine that can unequivocally say ball or strike, yes or no. It's not debatable, and that's a good thing. There is an argument to be said about human error is part of the game, right?
Absolutely.
Now, because now that said, some of the statistically driven things nearly ruined the game, like the shift.
Absolutely.
The idea of, okay, if Joey Votto is the batter for the Cincinnati Reds, or now the Toronto Blue Jays when he comes off the injured list, is up and he's a left-handed hitter, and he 90% of the time when he hits the ball on the ground, he hits it to the right side of second base. It makes perfect sense. Let's put 3 fielders over there and have the third baseman stand where the shortstop normally would play, and let's guard against that. But then the thing that always struck me about that aspect of it is, if I'm Joey Votto I come up there and I lay a bunt down the third base line
Absolutely.
every time I come to the plate until they stop letting me do that.
Absolutely. I often said during the years of the shift that if Tony Gwynn were playing, he'd hit 450 because he'd be able to take the ball the other way every time he was up. And of course, that would probably, make the shift unwise to employ while he was at the plate.
Right.
But somebody like Rod Carew or Tony Gwynn that could take the ball the other way,
control guys
on a regular basis, would have feasted on that. And the thing that I didn't like about the shift was sometimes they would even station the second baseman and the shortstop in like shallow center field.
Yeah.
It's like the rover in a softball game.
Right.
There's not 10 men out there. And I did think it sort of had a negative effect on the integrity of the sport. And now they've made adjustments to change that. But
and the point I was driving at with the statistics is that that nearly ruined the game. And now the rule is you must have two fielders on either side of second base,
right,
which just means the shift isn't as extreme as it was. They still shift, so they're going to have the shortstop stand pretty much on second base.
Agreed. And the flip side of the coin is you don't really want to see the powers that be legislate the game in terms of what you can and can't do. If you want to employ a particular defense, who's to say you can't do that? In football, if you employ a particular type of defense and it works, then you're going to keep doing it. And to me, it was just something that was so extreme that it did affect like I said before, the integrity of the sport.
Say you were saying that where you might have a particular defensive strategy that you want to employ. Like there's always the bottom of the ninth, 2 outs, bases loaded, weak hitter up, they're out of pinch hitters, and you bring the left fielder in, and now you got 5 infielders,
right,
and they all play in, or whatever the case might be. I assume the rule allows for that still. As long as you've got 2 guys on either side of second base, I think you're probably legit at that.
Yeah, I don't know that there's been any changes in that regard, and you don't see that.
Don't see it much.
Very, very, very much, very rare. But still, in all, that's a strategy that that may or may not work.
So in the minor leagues now, for the last year or two, they've been experimenting with 2 different ball strike scenarios about how balls and strikes get called. One in the lower minor leagues is just it's machine based, and the machine tells the umpire what the call was, and the umpire makes the signal. Fair enough. And then in the AAA leagues, what they've been doing is a challenge system. Is apparently I don't know what technology the managers have access to in the dugout. I hope none.
No kidding.
But they couldn't, and I don't remember what the rule is, if they're allowed 3 of these a game or 1 an inning or what it is. But they can challenge it, and then it goes to someone. I don't know if it goes to New York or if it goes in AAA baseball. I don't doubt that's the case. But somebody gets to look at it on a screen and say, that's a ball.
Well, that's always tugged at my shorts too about the replay in baseball. Pardon me. We for I don't know how long they did it without any replays. Now it's in all sports. It's part of the game in all professional sports. But these replays take 5 minutes, 7 minutes. And they got some guy back in the league office, 2 guys usually, looking at this over and over and over again, just like we are on TV.
Yeah.
And usually, in most cases, it's fairly obvious after you see it a couple times. And I'm going to switch gears a little bit because we apply it to hockey. I don't know how many times I've seen a goal scored and the opposing coach will challenge it on an offside call.
Right.
And there's a referee out there. There's a linesman out there. He's got one job, and that's to watch for offside.
Yeah.
And they will call something back 10 minutes after the goal is scored. They'll take it down because the tip of his skate is on the other side of the red line. And it doesn't have anything to do with the play. It doesn't give the offensive team any kind of advantage. And like I said, for years and years and years and years, it was decided, based on what by the naked eye.
Yeah.
And it worked just fine. So to me, it's technology's a blessing and a curse, like in pretty much every walk of life.
Right. Yeah, and I think that I guess I'm a believer that you let the game play. It's played by humans. It's officiated by humans. There's going to be some errors there. That's okay. I think the replays and the technology should be limited to the egregious mistake. Now, how do you define egregious mistake? That becomes the question, right? Is you got to figure out, okay, is that guy that was offside by a skate blade width, is that worth pulling back and disallowing the goal? Probably not in my mind. But in baseball, is a ball strike call worth turning over? Probably not. Now, guy getting tagged out at second base or at home plate or something like that, or did the ball hit the fair pole? Did the ball hit or did it get into the crowd? Whatever the case. Sorry, I'm a purist. If it hits the pole, it's a fair ball. So why do they call it the foul pole?
I have no idea.
But again, I'm a purist in that regard, except for the fair pole stuff.
Well, I am too. I mean, I'm an old school guy. I think the game, has evolved to the extent that you don't see a lot of bunting is something you rarely see. Sacrificing a runner. A lot of managers employ the Earl Weaver philosophy and sit back and wait for the 3-run home run.
Yep.
But good solid baseball manufacturing of runs is still effective in my estimation. But it's just the way the game has evolved over the years, and a lot of that has to do with putting fannies in the seats.
Yes.
People like to see the home run.
Or it's like when I grew up, when you grew up watching baseball. I watch a lot of old games on YouTube, for example. You come across, I grew up a Cincinnati Reds fan, you go back and you stumble upon the Game 7 of the 1975 World Series, the game after the Carlton Fisk home run, and watch that game. And the thing that is striking about those games is 9-inning games with 15 hits took 2 hours and 15 minutes. And now, if you have a game like that, where somebody's got 15 hits and the score ends up being 8-6 or something like that, it took 3 hours and 20 minutes. And so I do think the pitch clock, I guess technically, is probably a technology invention. But the whole pitch clock idea to make sure that a pitcher throws the ball once he gets the ball, you don't have to. This isn't major league calculus to go figure out what my next pitch is going to be. I guess I like that the pitch clock has made the game a much more manageable and a much more predictable length.
Yeah, I agree that the replay kind of is kind of contrary to what they want to do in terms of speeding up the game. That you mentioned that 75 Game 7, the 75 World Series. That an anecdote that comes to mind is that if Spaceman Bill Lee was the starting pitcher for the Boston Red Sox, and he was quite a character.
He was a character.
And the great Don Gullett was the starter for the Reds. He was their ace at the time, and I believe the Reds won that game 3-1, if I'm not mistaken.
3-1, 4-2, something like that.
It was a low scoring ball game, and Lee pitched a good ball game, and the Red Sox didn't get any runs. And the post game comment that Bill Lee made was, Don Gullett is going to the Hall of Fame, and I'm going to the Elliott Lounge, which was a tricky establishment down the street from Fenway Park.
Yeah,
and I always thought that was he put it very succinctly.
He was.
That was one hell of a World Series. I'll tell you
and
that.
I forget who it was that talked to Bill Lee before. It wasn't Game 7. It was one of the earlier games that Bill Lee pitched. I think anyway, is that Tony Perez was longtime slugger for the Reds. Hall of Famer now. He was really the glue of that big red machine. He was Mr. Dependable in terms of if you needed a run driven in, he was going to get it done one way or the other.
He hunted RBI.
Yes, he did. And it was either the pitching coach or the manager at the time, which would have been Don Zimmer. Am I wrong? You think of that? Or was it Johnny McNamara was still with him? Whoever it was, one of the coaching entourage told Bill Lee. Bill Lee had this pitch that he'd throw occasionally that other people referred to as like an eephus pitch. So it was just a big blooper, slow softball type of pitch. And they told him, you throw it to anybody you want except Perez. And he threw one to Perez, and Perez just salivated all over that thing and hit it over the green monster about 500 feet, and just I don't know why he didn't listen to his coaching staff.
Yeah, it was like a slow pitch softball pitch. Of course, the original eephus pitch was delivered by a guy by the name of Rip Sewell.
Oh yeah.
And Rip Sewell was in the All-Star game in 1941, and he threw an eephus pitch to Ted Williams, who may, in the minds of some, be the best pure hitter in the history of the game.
Yep.
And he hit the eephus pitch for a home run. And Rip Sewell shook his head later when asked about it and said, I didn't think anybody was strong enough to hit that pitch, out of the ballpark, because basically the hitter's supplying all the power.
Yep. Well, we appreciate everybody tuning in today. This is our first episode. We plan to drop these weekly is the plan going forward. So if you've got some suggestions for topics or something you'd like our take on, drop something in the comments and we'll get back to it as soon as we can. So other than that, everybody, catch you next time.
Time to bug out for the dugout. Have a good day, folks.
Hey, thanks for joining us here at Our 20 Days. We appreciate the time that you invest in our videos and audio podcasts. If you'd like to go to our20days.com, you can join as a member and you'll be notified every week of new content. And we'd sincerely appreciate that. Thanks and have a great day.